I have all this stuff up on my screen, and it's not just to go down memory lane from backgammon, but as long as I have this, I am going to go down memory lane for just a few minutes, because for those of you that aren't aware, the big poker boom when it really happened, starting whatever 2004 or 5, wherever you want to trace it back to, there were different conduits for where poker players came from. There's one whole group of people that used to play video games like StarCraft and all that stuff. People that were video game experts became poker players. On the other end of the spectrum, there were people who played Magic the Gathering, which I've never played. I don't even know the rules. And a lot of those people turned to poker as well. And yet another source of poker players came from the backgammon community, which is essentially where I came from. I learned how to play chess at a very, very late age, and I learned how to play backgammon at a very late age. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I became friendly and very competitive with a lot of high-caliber tournament players in backgammon. Phil Lack was a very, very good friend of mine. Falafel, who turns out to be one, if not the best player in the world, at least one of them, was a good friend of mine going way, 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 way back. And that's kind of where I came from. And it's no surprise to see a lot of great backgammon players become great poker players. And that's kind of where it came from. So just a little bit of trip down memory lane. There's a reason why I do this. This was actually kind of funny. I dug this up, this 2001 tournament result that where I actually, it's so funny to see some of the names that have become poker players in here and people that have progressed to different things. Like here is a tournament that I played a long time ago where Phil Lack was in. Noah Siegel won the one-point match, and for those of you who don't know who he is, he's involved in a lot of things. I actually won the Paris satellite, which I couldn't use. I sold to a friend of mine. And you can go through this stuff, and a lot of these guys became pretty decent poker players for sure. The other thing, it's so funny, more memory lane, I was able to track down all these different files I had. This file over here is actually an email that Phil Lack, a.k.a. Unabomber, sent to me, and this is back in a long time ago when between the two of us, we might have had a bankroll of like $1,000. Okay, I was rich compared to him, and I had no money. And this is, you see how where people on. He sent me this long and drawn-out email, this incredibly bizarre swapping arrangement for what was a $50 tournament, I think, actually a $175 backgammon tournament, and for those of you who know Phil, you'll know that this is very, very characteristic. It's very complex, incredibly tough to follow, and yet very, very endearing as well. And for those of you that haven't read it, you can just feel free to go through it. But it's kind of funny to see where we've all been. Like Phil Lack is now, playing a party poker Premier League with like billion-dollar buy-ins, and you know how famous he became from poker and all this stuff. But everybody kind of cut their teeth in backgammon. And what I just came to learn in the last couple of days is that Johannes was actually rooming with or staying with Phil for a period of time when he was living in New York. And I'm actually very surprised I hadn't run into Johannes, although I may have. I just didn't exactly know who he was. One other thing, just again to go down memory lane, which will lead us into this discussion, is this. This was the last record kept of the infamous or the famous fib chouette, which goes back pre-Games Grid, pre all the newer backgammon sites. This was the biggest game there was. It was a game. It was a $25 chouette, which played for years on fibs, and you just kind of see some of. I don't know if Johannes, you might even know some of these names on this list, but it's actually kind of funny to go through it. And this is actually the closing balances of what everybody either owed me or I owed them in 25s. And you see, if you go down the list, see Uberdeen, who was originally Dean Munch. Unfortunately, he passed away, so I had to give him a thing saying he's dead. Now, this guy, Karn, he died also, and he made, the biggest, error you can make, or ethical error. You're not allowed to die when you owe people money. So he owed me 41 points, and he died, which is kind of annoying. And you see some of these names on here. You see Ultraman. He was Phil Lack back then. At least we ended up at 0. The reason why I bring this up is because you see this guy PB, and PB I actually owed 63 points to, and I'm not even sure whether I paid him or not. I think I did eventually, but I put cheater on there. And the reason why is back in these days, this was back in whatever it was, 2000, like maybe 2000, I think it was 2001. The main source of computer program, the best computer program out there was Jellyfish. And that was the backgammon program that everybody used. That was the most advanced backgammon program that, did rollouts, that assessed positions quickly. And remember, backgammon's a game that's very, very solvable. I would say pretty easily. I would say easily, but hell of a lot easier than poker. And so it seemed as though PB was running Jellyfish at the time while everybody else was playing, running positions and running the positions. So basically, it's everybody playing against Jellyfish. And someone found out, and basically the whole game just kind of blew up overnight. So that was rather frustrating. So I bring that up because Jellyfish eventually was replaced as the backgammon program of choice by Snowie. Okay, Snowie was at the time the most highly advanced backgammon program out there. And what people would do is they would see how close they could get to playing equivalent to Snowie. I forget what it was, but I think back in the day, Gus Hansen would be as close as a person could get to going through X amount of moves, whatever it was, without making a mistake defined by Snowie. And that's how people would kind of define their games. Now, since then, is that right, Ming? It's still he's still the best? Snowie still is the best? That's very interesting. Because I don't know. Oh, Gus is still the best. Could be. So yeah, I mean, Gus was. I mean, we played some, and he was always a savant at whatever game he played. I mean, him and Abe and those kind of guys are just really good at everything. But so I don't know whether Snowie was replaced by the newest software, whatever it is. But what happened is I kind of left backgammon for poker like everybody else, and I won't tell that story again here. And I really just gave backgammon up completely. I mean, I play every once in a while, but I kind of, in the back of my head, was always thinking, I wonder if the Jellyfish people, as I like to call them, or the Snowie people, would ever develop something similar for poker. Okay? Now, I mean, as I went through my poker life, playing online, all this stuff, I mean, I heard stories, about bots and training devices and things like that. But, I was wondering if poker was a game that, I don't want to say that could be solved, but at the very least could be solved enough so that people could learn from it. Now, it's people's opinions differ on whether it's even possible to have a game with such imperfect information to be solvable, or to at least be close to solvable, where you could really learn from a computer's artificial intelligence. But, it certainly in my head seemed possible. So about a couple of months ago, I happened to have seen that PokerSnowie was out there. And I didn't know when it came out there, or, well, it's, yeah, I mean, there you go. So someone already said that they had some poker playing version of Snowie be out in a few weeks. All right, could be. But, I lost track of all this. So when I saw that PokerSnowie was finally launching in a way, I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. I mean, let me get a hold of these guys and see what this is all about. So, and again, we're going to get to Johannes in a minute. I'm sorry, but I think this introduction is important. So I spoke with Stefan, who was one of the heads of Snowie, and I was speaking to him, hey, listen, at Poker X Factor, we really focus more on MTTs, on in tournaments, essentially because I wasn't an expert on cash, and I didn't really know how to teach people on it. Maybe there's something we could do where, our tournament guys learn from you guys cash games, and maybe some cash games guys learn from tournaments, or whatever it is. And so I got to speak to him about kind of the history of Snowie, and the natural thing that I asked, or I didn't ask, the first thing I kind of brought up was, if I were someone who had access to a computer that can analyze poker hands optimally, in a way, that could either solve it or, make it somewhat solvable, what would I do with it? And, you have this type of thing. You have the angel on your shoulder, and you have the devil on your left shoulder, right? Like, on the one hand, you're like, well, if I have access to a computer that can solve all this, screw everybody. I'm just going to just run it. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's, I'll just run it and figure out how to just win with it. But the other way, the less short-sighted way, I think, is to turn this into kind of a training tool and a coaching tool where you probably, from a business perspective, might even make more money in the long run doing that and not be shady about it. So when I spoke to him about it, I'm like, I'm glad to see that this is what you're doing with this type of stuff. I don't know how long it took to develop. And so he gave me a trial, and I went through it, and I tried. And frankly, I'm not a cash expert. I can't determine how strong the player is. I can't determine how strong the computer is. All I can tell you is that it's very, very interesting, and it's very, very useful to me. And I think it's awesome. I really think it's awesome. I think it's an awesome idea. As Johannes will go over, there are two kinds of things going on here. There's a poker coach that takes your existing hands and analyzes them. And then on the other hand, there's kind of a tablet-based thing, which is a poker trainer, where you can actually play against the thing. Or in the case of what I did, I played against 7 of the things. I played against 7 Snowies at the same time. And then what it does is, well, forget how you do against it. It'll analyze your play and all of this. So that's pretty much the introduction. Now, again, although I've never met Johannes, although I believe it, I must have. I don't remember meeting him. He's obviously a world-class backgammon player. I don't know if he's ever played poker. He's probably, he's probably a great poker player too, and he's probably just like DeSavo, as Lars Bonding became a poker player. Although Lars, I don't think is that good, but that's another story. And it's probably like half wreck, another one of the Danes who became a good poker player and all that stuff. So whatever it is. So let me see if I can get this over to first. Let me check the sound. Hold on. All right, Johannes, do you have sound now?
Yes, I hear you, and I hope you can hear me.
I hear you perfectly. Before I do anything, I'm going to give you control of the presentation so that you can go do that. I'm going to try to talk as little as possible, but if you could try to look in the chat box to see different questions that might come up, I'll look for them too, and if I have anything, I'll let you know. But otherwise, I'm just going to, yeah, Mike, sorry, Mike, he's got sound. Everybody's got sound but you. What can I tell you? So I'm going to stop sharing myself, and let me just see it. Ready? Let's go.
Okay. Do you see my screen now?
Perfect.
Okay. So yeah, hello Eric, hello everybody. Thanks for the introduction, and I found it quite interesting, the stories about backgammon. It has been quite a while. I think I started backgammon over 20 years ago, and yeah, there were always funny stories. Pilar was a funny guy always, and it was a good time for sure. So now what I would like to do is to present first ourselves, so myself and my business partner, and also I wanted to talk a little bit about Backgammon Snowie, which you have done already, and then talk about the way how we approached poker and what we did there. And finally also show you several situations in PokerSnowie, in the PokerCoach, to see several things, how Snowie actually plays and how you can use this tool to analyze certain situations. And then last but not least, I would like to import a session and see what you can do there, and what kind of statistics and numbers you can see in the PokerCoach, and how you can use it to learn it efficiently and become a better player. Yeah, so first of all, guy on the right side, and on the left is Olivier, my business partner. So Olivier has a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering and a PhD as well from Scotland. Myself, I have studied computer science in Germany, and we both were active backgammon players. Also Olivier, he traveled a lot to tournaments and yeah, was also a successful player. I was actually a professional player, making my living by playing backgammon. And I was actually ranked number 3 in the world for some time, and yeah, having a great time playing backgammon. So the first product that we had was a Backgammon Snowie, as you already described it. So it was based, or it is based on artificial neural networks. So these networks, it's something that exists in nature. It's in the brain of the humans and of animals. They are the neurons, and they're called neural networks. So these neurons, they are simulated in the computer, and they can be trained with something. So they are actually, it's a mathematical model which can be used to learn things, whatever the things are. So it's a very interesting technique. It's well known for some time, and it's used very successfully in different domains. And we applied these neural networks to backgammon, where the neural networks played against itself and became better and better playing backgammon. I mean, it started completely random, so throwing all the checkers wildly over the board and trying to find out what happens. And after some time, the AI became stronger and stronger. The games made more sense. And finally, very complex strategies evolved. And in the end, the final result, the Backgammon Snowie, was in fact better than all humans, including myself. I could not beat myself, Snowie, in the long run. I mean, you can be lucky in 10 games, in 100 games, but in the long run, you see you're making errors, and Snowie also makes errors, but very small ones and very occasionally. So for the existing backgammon players, especially the older ones, it was quite quite a shock, because they used a lot of time to learn the game. They had a lot of experience, and they did like hand rollout at the time, like 100 times. They played the same situation to find out what's going to happen. And suddenly the computer was much better than them. And finally also everybody could learn from the computer very efficiently without gathering all the experience themselves. So then Snowie became the reference software in the market and was the referee for bets, and was used for analyzing the World Championship matches, and everybody used it and knew about it. Then for us it was a natural development to walk on and move to poker, which is, as Eric already has said, much more complex because of the hidden information. In backgammon you see the checkers, your own checkers, and the whole position of the opponent. So everything is open. It's like if you play poker but with open hole cards. That makes the game, of course, quite a bit easier. But poker has normally hidden hole cards, and that adds a very high level of complexity to the game. And we have spent quite some years and a lot of effort to develop a learning algorithm for this game, and also based on neural networks. So the neural networks, they try to detect patterns and make the move in the end where the experience of the neural network says this is just the best move. So during training, perhaps I can explain a little bit how it works. During training, Snowie is playing, and it's playing against other computer opponents. But these other opponents, they have a very big advantage. They look inside the brain of Snowie, so they know exactly what Snowie does. And if Snowie, let's say, bluffs a little bit too much in a certain situation, then the opponents would know this immediately and would hammer on Snowie in the right direction. So that means if Snowie bluffs too much, the opponents, they would call much more and try to catch all these bluffs, or even make a bluff against the bluff to win the pot as well. So then if Snowie notices, oh, I'm getting hammered, I'm bluffing too much, each time I lose, Snowie starts bluffing a bit less. And when it finally starts to bluff too little, then the opposite happens. Snowie's opponents, they notice each time Snowie bets, it has a strong hand. So of course the opponents will not call down so much anymore. And Snowie then in return will notice, oh, each time I bluff, I suddenly win. And each time I have a strong hand, my opponent folds and I don't get enough value out of these hands. So then Snowie starts bluffing it again a little bit more. So through this iterative process, Snowie reaches some kind of equilibrium where it bluffs just in the right frequency. And this final strategy, where there's this equilibrium where the computer opponents cannot win much anymore against Snowie, is actually called GTO, which means game theoretically optimal. So Snowie has gathered now super much experience. It has played trillions of hands over years of training. It is training on the big computer cluster 24/7, and it's still training while we are speaking, so it's still improving all the time. and yeah, it's pretty good now. So the AI, so the neural network is called PokerSnowie, and it works on no limit hold'em, or heads up and ring games up to the players. It's good for deep stack situations and for shallow stacks, so it's up to 400 big blinds, so really deep stacks it has trained. It has reached a really good level, so we believe it is as good or even stronger than the professional poker players. And what we've actually done to test the whole system, to test the AI and also to test the PokerCoach, the interface, is we have set up a team in Montenegro of people that are students or that are young people but they didn't have a job. And we told them, look, you can work for us, you can just learn the game of poker by using the PokerCoach. And just this, no other tool allowed, you just use this to train. So this is what they did. They practiced for some weeks. They tried to recognize the patterns, they analyzed with the help of PokerCoach. They played better and better and dropped the error rate down. And in the end, now they're playing the highest levels at PokerStars Zoom, so 255, even $5.10 and $10.20. They play at these tables, they play profitably, and yeah, they became really strong poker players. So that's, for us, it means that the AI is really good, and this PTO strategy makes perfect sense. And also that the PokerCoach offers the right features for them to really use it and improve by this. I mean, these guys, they have never seen a HUD, for example. They don't even know what it is. The only thing they use is PokerCoach. This is product. I will come to that shortly to make a demo, as I said, with some certain situations. It's PokerCoach is the name. We just released the second version, which has quite some more features and is in a better shape than the first version. And yeah, I think I'll just go to the demo situations I would like to show.
Hey, Johannes, just so you know, there are questions coming in the chat. Just ignore them for now, and what we'll do is that, when you're done, we'll track back through them, and then we'll take on those then.
Okay, yes, I think that's fine. I think I cannot read the chat at the same time as I speak.
Perfect.
So if you can take care of that, that's good. Okay, so basically you can do two main things in this product. One thing is you import your hands that you have played online, and you get an automatic analysis, and it pinpoints out the errors that you have made. And the other thing is you set up positions and you analyze using the features that we provide. So let's do the situations first. So I can set up a position. I can choose how many players at the table. I can choose the stake. And let's say I put 6 players at the table. And now I can show something. We will start very slowly. I will show the preflop table. The first guy under the gun now in 6 max. So this preflop table shows a grid of how you should play in this position with these stack sizes. So it's 100 big blinds now. How you should play every hole card combination. So it has 169 fields for every hole card combination, 1 field. So you can see by the color code exactly how, at one glance, how you should play. So everything in green, you should raise. So in the left top corner, we see an ace, pair of aces. So we should raise this, and yeah, everything in green. And in yellow is the calling range. We see immediately there is no yellow, so that's nice. But here you should just raise or fold, Snowie says. Obviously because you should exert pressure on the blinds and don't give them a free ride to see the flop. Everything in white is a fold. And then we see a percentage, a number, a 23. This is for queen 9 suited. Snowie thinks this is a mixed play. So 23% of the time Snowie would raise half pot here. And the rest of the time Snowie would fold. Normally there are many more fields with numbers. In this case it's just 1 field. But this is a tool or a feature where you can see immediately how you should play preflop, and it's very easy to learn from this because you see everything in one glance. Then I show you the next feature. You can see the range advice. That means in this window you see also the 169 combinations for your hole cards, but they are displayed in a bit different way. They are distributed in a range, a folding range and a raising range. In this example, there is no calling range again. But you can see now the percentage. You can see that Snowie would open the pot here 17% of the time. You can then see all the hole cards here, and you can see the raising range. The folding range, I see, for example, is the best hand that Snowie would still fold. And then I see all the list here of the folding range. And I can do a very simple exercise. We see now 17%, it's the opening, I mean the raising percentage. If I let fold one guy and look at the next range advice, I see now it would open 20% or 21%, which is normal. I mean, the closer to the button, the looser you can get, the more hands you can open the pot with. So here on the cutoff, it's already 27% almost. If I hold for this guy on the button, I see 42%. So Snowie makes a very big difference between the cutoff player and the button player. So I think this is something that everybody knows. I mean, just to show there's a big positional awareness by Snowie as well. And it's also clear that you should open the pot, you should just raise and fold, which people at the higher limit do anyway. So now we come to something a bit more interesting. I will go back to the cutoff player. And now the question is, let's say I think it was 27% of the time this guy should open the pot with. But now which hands should he choose for racing, for opening the pot? I think what is clear is that the best hands like pocket aces, pocket kings, he would never fold, he would raise. I mean, that's obvious. But then there are other hands like, what about ace-8, for example? Now I can give the player a certain specific hand, and I can see the evaluation of Snowie at the bottom. And it says it's 100% fold. The EV, so the expected value, is 0, which is always 0 for a fold. And then for call and raise, I see the EV, it's always in big blinds. So it's a very small fold, so it's a borderline hand. I can also see something interesting for this hand. I can see the hand strength. So here are some more numbers, and I will explain you what they mean, because we will use them a bit more often. The hand strength, the showdown strength, means here on the left side it's 1.20, which means this is the strength of the hand if now everybody that is in the pot is all in and we just deal the cards till the end. So my average hand strength would be 1.0. It goes from 0 to 2. So the average would be 1. And now I have a better than average hand strength. And the betting strength is, if I bet now half pot, how strong is my hand after the opponents have acted once and they don't fold. So I'm not looking at their folding range. I'm looking at their calling and raising range and compare then my strength against their ranges. Now I see my betting strength is 0.97, so a bit less than 1. So actually this hand would count as a bluff and not as a value hand. So if I know this, then I think, well, ace-8 is almost a value hand, so this should be a good candidate to bluff. But why is Snowie then folding this hand? So let's look at a different hand. I take now 5-6 suited. This hand, Snowie likes to raise 100%. EV is a little bit better than folding, so a kind of borderline hand. But if I look at hand strength now, I see that this hand strength is significantly lower than ace-8. So ace-8 is somehow the hand in that respect, because the hand strength is now, after betting, is only 0.75. So it's a worse hand in that respect. So why is now Snowie choosing 5-6 suited to open the pot, but not ace-8 offsuit? So the reason is that you have to look at how the hand is actually playing post-flop. So if I have ace-8, post-flop, I somehow don't have a good hand in any way. I mean, either I hit my 8, then probably there are overcards to my pair of 8s, and I have to play very slowly. I cannot exert a lot of pressure. I cannot pump up the pot. And if I hit the ace, it's the same thing. I have the best pair, but I never know if I'm in kicker trouble. If the 8 is very very small, so it just plays bad post flop. Whereas if I have 5-6 suited, I can hit a flush draw, and then I can really do a lot of bluff raises or bluff bets on the flop turn and even river. And I can also hit my flush, of course. Then I can also hit a straight draw, and this hand plays completely different. I can really put pressure on my opponents with this kind of hand. So this is one thing that Snowie notices. It doesn't look at the showdown strength, which is somehow also irrelevant, but it looks how well does the hand play. And the other point, which is somehow a bit independent on this argument, is another argument. If I raise here, and let's say these two guys, they fold, and the big blind player raises back pot. So now I see my 5-6 suited, I still can call, so I can put this into my calling range, whereas ace-8 offsuit, it's quite a big fold. So I have an EV of -153, and if I raise ace-8 instead of my 5-6 suited, then my next range in this situation after a re-raise may be exploitable, because now I have to fold to. Basically, Snowie looks at two things. It looks at how the hand plays post-flop, and it looks how does my range look like after a re-raise. So let's go back to here. So let's say the cutoff player raises, next player folds, and now it's the small blind on turn, small blind to act. So now let's look at this position. So first of all, it's clear the small blind player has a very bad position. He will be out of position for the whole game, and already one player has showed aggression. So it's clear I will fold the biggest part, a large part of my hand. So if I look at the range advice to verify this, I can see, yes, exactly, I have to fold 80% of my hand. So how should I now, for the small blind player, construct the raising range? I mean, also here it's clear the best hands should always be raised. Like if I give myself pocket aces, it's a very clear raise. It's not a hand that you should slow play. It would even cost 2 big blinds to not raise here. If I have ace-king suited, these kinds of hands, they're just raises. So now, to balance my play and to not be predictable and to not be exploitable, I have to always include some bluff hands into my raising range. So which hands should I use for bluffing? So first of all, I'm choosing the bet size 1 pot. So I should find out if I bet 1 pot, will I ever be called, or will they throw away anyway all the time? So I will try my raise, and I look at the big blind player. I mean, this player, he will fold 96% of the time. He faces now 2 raises and a significant bet size here. He has to pay $60 to just stay in the pot. So he will fold, obviously, most of his hands. So let's disregard this player for a second and just let him fold and look at the next player. So this guy, he has constructed, as we have seen before, he has constructed his range in a way so that he can show resistance. He will not have ace-8, ace-7 offsuit and these kinds of hands. He will have the suited connectors with which he actually can call. This we see here, his range advice, he folds 32% of the time only, and the rest of the time he defends his hand. So what does that mean for me now here? If I know if I raise, most of the time I will have some opposition, that I will have resistance. That means I should use hands that have a lot of potential flop. So a good candidate for raising would probably be like 10-jack suited. Because here, even if I get called, I can still hit a flush draw, I can hit a straight draw, and I can hit high pairs. And it's again a hand which has not only potential, but also which plays well, like we have seen with the 5-6 suited just before. It's a hand where I can continue to bet on the flop and do some check raises with just a flush or straight draw. So it's a hand that plays well. So these kinds of hands, they are good to be used for that, for bluffing. But let's look at the pre-flop table again, how Snowie would actually play. So I look at the green fields for, now. So Snowie races from pocket nines up to pocket aces, has ace-king combinations, and has then king-queen suited, queen-jack suited, and 10-jack suited, for example. So suited connectors, high suitedness, for the reasons I just described. But then we see another group of hands, which is quite interesting, which is here the ace-3, ace-4, and ace-5 suited. So Snowie likes to raise with these hands as well. Let's try to find out why that is so. I mean, first of all, we say, okay, ace-5 has also a good potential. You can still make a flush draw, even the nuts flush draw. And you can make a straight draw, although just a gut shot straight draw, but still. And you have an ace, which gives you a high pair if you hit it. But on the other hand, it's not an optimal hand for if you just look at the potential. Because first of all, the 5 is a very small card. Then the ace, you may have kicker trouble if you hit really the ace. So why does Snowie actually choose these kinds of hands for bluff racing? And it has a strong opinion. It has a 100% race here. But let's look at the response of the opponent. So I give myself again the 10-jack suited. I raise. Let's say the big blind player folds, and now it's again the cutoff player who's on turn. So now I see the folding range is 28% and the raising range is 17%. I just memorized these percentages for a few seconds. So we have 28 and 17. I go back and change to ace-5. Do the same thing. And all of a sudden, these percentages have changed. So 28 becomes 33% fold. Which is, of course, very positive for me because my bluff is immediately successful, 5% more than with 10 jack suited. And the races, they go down from 17% to 14%, which is also good. I don't want to be re-raised if I play a bluff. So that's very positive for ace-5. And the reason is, if I look in the, let's say in the calling range, or the raising range first, I see that the raising range of the cutoff player contains a lot of aces. Ace-7 suited, ace-ace, ace-king, ace-jack suited, and stuff like this. So now I have one ace out of the deck. I have the ace of clubs. So now all these combinations, like ace-king suited, where he would re-raise with, there are only 3 combinations instead of 4, because ace-king clubs he cannot have anymore. So this is the effect of my ace that I hold in my hand, and that is not in the deck anymore, and that my opponent cannot have at this time. The same is true for the calling range. He would call with pocket pairs, but then the next group of hands is also aces. So that's very interesting to see how Snowie selects the hands here to mix bluff hands into his value raising range.
Just to stop you for just a second, Johannes, I mean, we're going to go over some hands that I played a little later, and this was the first one that I noticed. A blunder that I made was exactly this hand. Actually, I was in position, which made it a little different, but yeah, it was recommending. It was actually saying it was a pretty huge blunder to call that 3-betting with the ace-5 suited exactly was much recommended. And I was wondering, you know, what it had to be either a combination of having the ace blocker and, you know, having a decently playable hand also. Because I mean, just like if you had ace 8 here, yeah, you'd have the blocker, but you wouldn't have all that good post flop equity also. Like the ace 5 suited has a decent enough combination of playability and that ace blocker. I find that very interesting, actually.
Yeah, actually, the ace 5 is better than ace 8. I mean, from a kicker point of view, it doesn't change much. But you have the additional option to just hit a straight immediately, or at least a straight gut shot draw, which makes the hand just better playable.
Yep.
And what is funny is also this kind of situation I monitored during the training. In the very beginning part of the training, I noticed, well, there are percentages in ace 3, ace 4, ace 5 and stuff, and I was thinking that it's actually wrong to raise with these hands. And I was wondering if it's not somehow in the neural network, because the neural network gets the information, okay, I have an ace, and I have, let's say the example, ace 3. So ace 3 is connected with one gap, and it's an ace. And it's very similar to ace queen in that respect. You have an ace, and you have a one gap connection. Then, of course, it sees it has the queen or the 3. But I was actually thinking that the net gets a bit confused with these two similar situations and just raises a little bit ace 3 because ace queen is a raise. But then, after some more training, I noticed, no, it's going really up this percentage, and it reaches even 100%. And then it also became clear to me, yeah, it's because you have the blocking ace in your hand. And
well, interestingly, one other thing about that is I've done a lot of work with the PXF guys with preflop stuff as far as shoving and using GTO ranges for preflop things, and I would get these questions all the time. That I would look at ranges for what's profitably shovable, even from early position, and you would see ace 2 through 5 suited would be pretty trivial shoves, and essentially everything from ace 6 to ace 8 in certain positions would be trivial folds. And you see it's an incredible bias with these suited wheel draws just because of all the different things that you could do with them. And I find it interesting that it translates over to cash and post-flop play as well.
Yeah, actually, I mean, you said before you're more a tournament player, and the audience perhaps as well. But many of the things, I mean, this is just general poker strategy. It's independent of cash game or tournament. I mean, tournament, in the beginning of a tournament, it is like cash game. It's only when you reach closer to the prize pool that you have to change your strategy.
Sure.
But in the beginning, I mean, all these kinds of things, it's basic poker knowledge, which is very good to know in cash game or tournaments. All right, so yeah, that was my part for the preflop. So let's go to the post-flop. Oh, sorry, I clicked something I didn't want. Okay, I have a position here, a very simple thing. It's again the cutoff player that raises, and it's the big blind that calls. Big blind checks, and cutoff player makes the pot, and it's now the big blind player to defend his hand. So here I will be talking about quite easy concepts. In fact, many players, they will know these concepts, but I've seen these hands misplayed regularly, so I think it's worth looking at it. So there are different classes of hands that the big blind player can have now. I mean, one convenient class of hands is like a pair of 6. You have trips, and of course this is one of the good value hands that should be used for racing. Yeah, the strongest hands that should be raised, again, like always, mixed with bluff hands. So pocket 6s is one of the best hands. Then we have another category, something like 9, 10. So you have a medium pair, and this is what I've seen many times wrong. They think they have the pair. It's probably the best hand at this time. You can see that at the hand strength. So I have a better hand strength than 1.0. So 1.0 would correspond to 50% equity in this case with 2 players. So I win more than 50%. I have most likely the best hand. But it is still better to just call and keep the pot small. And this is what also Sklensky wrote in one of his books. He wrote, big pots and big bets are for big hands. And this is not a big hand. I don't want to play a big pot with this hand. I mean, if I raise here and then I perhaps bet on the turn, I end up on the river with the big pot just to find out I have the second best hand. And that's just not right. I mean, here I should play as cheap as possible. I want to see a showdown here, but I don't want to invest a lot of money into this hand. It's just a pair of nines, a medium pair. So a call is clearly right. And what is interesting to see also here in the hand strength is that if I call here, I have a good hand strength. I have more than 50% winning chances. But if I, for example, half pot, this is the raise, the bet size that Snowie choose, or in this spot situation. But if I raise here, my betting strength will be less than 1. So it will be 0.74, which basically means if I raise here, I turn my hand into a bluff. Because of the calling and re-raising range of my opponent will most likely be better than the hand. So that's not a good idea to raise here. It's very clear that you just have to call. Then a third category is something like 7-8, making a straight draw. It's straight draw. And this is, it's a hand that plays well now in this case and should be used for racing because this is a good hand to mix with the value races. This is a clear bluff. It has good potential to improve to the best hand. And I can also continue on the turn. I can bluff again. I can even bluff on the if I don't hit, or I just hit my straight, and I can really win a big pot with this hand. So this is the exact kind of hand which should be used for bluffing. It's a semi-bluff. So I have a lot of potential to improve to the best hand. And then there's the last category, which is something like 8 queen or so. It's just a bad hand. Hand strength is quite weak. And if I raise, I mean, it's a clear bluff. The problem here is that I don't have potential, and if I get called, the hand is just too weak. And these hands, they should never be used for bluffing. I mean, many people, they do it. They haven't bluffed for, I don't know, for 20 hands. Whatever comes, I will just raise as a bluff. And they would raise with this kind of hand. But it's just a bad hand selection. You should not use these pure bluffs. You should always use semi-bluffs. So now you could argue what happens if there are no draws available, like you have a flop 2-7 queen, for example. There's no flush draw, there's no straight draw. So does that mean I cannot bluff anymore, or bluff with complete crap? Or what should I do? So let's look how Snowie does it. You can look at the racing range. So first of all, the racing range is big. But the hands that Snowie selects, it's like this, King 5 suited. So it's not really a draw, this hand, at least the hand with the most potential. I mean, there's a king, which means even if it has top pair this time, I can improve to the winning hand with my king. And I have a backdoor flush. So at least if a club comes on the turn, I can continue to pressure and perhaps I hit my flush on the river. So Snowie would raise here with King 5 in clubs, diamonds and spades, but not King 5 of hearts, because there the potential is just less. And then you can see also hands like 2-3 in diamonds. So Snowie has a pair of twos, which is a pretty weak hand. But it can also be seen as a semi-bluff. So there's a backdoor flush possibility. And also it's a draw basically for a second pair or for trips. So it's also a kind of semi-bluff. So Snowie uses still, if with these boards, it uses whole cards which have the best potential possible to mix the value races with bluff races. Good, then I go to the next situation. I have two more. So I have here a situation actually by jungleman. We met him here in Malta on the Malta tournament, and he played some hands against Snowie. It's not a very interesting hand itself, but it's an interesting concept at least that can be learned from this. So it's a heads-up hand. Snowie raises pots, jungleman calls, jungleman checks, and Snowie makes a continuation bet of half pot. So nothing exciting. The question is, I mean, here jungleman called and was also correct by doing this way. But the first reaction could also be, hey, I have to mix my value raises here with bluff hands, and I should use semi-bluffs as we have just seen. So why would this not be a very good candidate for bluff raising? And in fact, it is a good candidate, but we have to be careful with our bluff raises here. So let's see the hand range at this point that jungleman has. So we see that he can have 3 of a kind, in fact trips 3, but it's very unlikely to have this. And he can have 2 pairs, but only ace-3 and queen-3. But actually, in this situation, you cannot pocket queens anymore, queens or trips aces. You would have re-raised on the preflop. So you lose some combinations of having trips now, and you also lose combinations of having 2 pairs. Queen, ace, you would also have re-raised. So you have, finally, you have very few hands that are really good value hands. In the 1-pair hands, the aces, scroll down here a bit, we see the best ace I can have is ace-9, then ace-8 down to ace-2, I guess. So the aces are good hands, but it's not a super strong value hand. I mean, the strong hands, it's only these 3, ace-3, queen-3, and trip-3. So in such a situation, I can obviously not bluff very much. I mean, my bluff frequency should depend on my value hands, on the amount of value hands that I have. And in this situation, I don't have many value hands. So if I look at the range advice of Snowie, how Snowie would play, I can see actually Snowie would only raise by 3.5 of the time. And then it mixes some high cards in there, which is the straight and straight flush hands. For example, like 2-4 would be a hand than my jack-4, because now I have a straight draw. But the point here is just if I raise now with queen-4, I would probably also raise with queen-5, which is basically the same hand, or queen-6, jack-5, or jack-6, or jack-7. It's all the same group of hands, so really I end up raising way too much. So I think it's very good to not raise here and really raise 2 hands. So now we can change also the ace into, let's say, a 9. And then we see immediately also Snowie changes, and now he really wants to at least 25% play a bluff raise with jack-4 suited. And actually, if we look at the hand, see again I have only 3 of kinds, threes, but I have some more 2 pairs combination. I have queen-9, queen-3, and 9-3. So I have more value hands, and that means I can raise more bluff hands. We see Snowie raises now, instead of 3.5% or what it was, it's now a bit more than 7%. So the raising range has suddenly doubled. So in this situation, which is quite a bit different then, I can really use many of the straight or flush draws to make a bluff raise here. But the thing here is you just have to think first, how big is my value range? How many value combinations can I actually hold? And then you can decide, okay, now I can build up my bluff range accordingly. I go to the last situation that I have here. It's also heads up, and we look at the button player. So the button player raises, the guy re-raises, and now we re-raise back. It's slightly wrong according to Snowie, but anyway, he played a pot re-raise, and the guy calls. Now, big blind checks, and it's our turn. So as always, we have to bet our strong value hands. I mean, that's always clear somehow, if it's not a slow play. But in principle, you should bet the best hands and mix in some semi-bluffs. So this hand seems exactly like the right type of hand to use it for betting here. It's an open-ended straight draw. It's a good semi-bluff. I have good potential to hit my draw. What does Snowie say to that? As Snowie says, it's quite a big mistake to bet here. It puts 8.5 big blinds, which is a quite significant error. And let's try to find out why this and what are the factors that is not the right move to bet here. So first I look at the range advice, how Snowie would actually play. What I can see is that Snowie would bet only 10% of the time, which is quite surprising because normally you showed a lot of strength now, having made 4 bets on the preflop, so the probability to hold aces or kings is quite high. And so it's natural to put some semi-bluffs into this range as well. But you see that Snowie likes to bet here with aces, kings, and queens, so with the overpairs, but then has very few other hands in there. We can see here, I'm not sure if you see that, but it's from the betting range, it has 95% of value bets, which is basically queens, kings, and aces, and high cards, only 5%. At the very first glance, this looks really strange. It looks almost wrong because it's not the normal ratio between value and bluff hands that you should have. But now to find out, let's see how the opponents can react to your I do bet with 7-8 here, and let's look how the opponent. Let's look at the opponent's response. The opponent folds only 27%, okay, but then it has also a significant all-in range of 17%. So I can check out what happens if the guy raises all-in. So now suddenly I see my 7-8, my initial draw is basically a hand throw away. It's a call according to Snowie, but the EV is the same basically, so it's a hand which is really worthless at this point. So perhaps it has to do that the other guy is all in. That's a suspicion that I have, and I can check what happens if I just change the size of the opponent. So just add 1,000 chips more. Boom. Now Snowie thinks a bet is 100% correct with this draw, and also the EV jumped up even for just checking. It went up, and the reason is that now the implied odds that I have are much higher than before. Before, I mean, if I get re-raised, I have 0 implied odds. I mean, it's just a matter of down then. But in this case, I have good implied odds. If I hit my street, I can extract a lot of more money from the opponent. And this is also why I can bet now. So if I half pot as before, and let's say the guy does, first I look at the range advice, how now he would play. So he wouldn't play much different. He would also have 25%, a bit different than before, but 25% folding range, 15% raising range. But let's say he raises the same amount as before. He was before all in with 48450. Now the big difference is before I had an EV of exactly 0. Now I have an EV of 20 blinds. So that's a huge difference. And the reason is now I can call and see what happens. If I hit my straight, I can extract more money. If I don't hit the straight, I can throw away. That's the very big difference between these two situations. So basically what I have to be very careful about is for deciding which hands to bluff bet here is to see what are my implied odds. And if I look now at the range advice with more stacks, with 1,000 in addition, I see that not only 10% I should bet here, I should bet 43% of the time. Then if I go into the 43%, I look which kind of hands I should bet with, I see a lot of high card hands. And these are the hands which have the most potential again. So it is the straight draws, the open-ended straight draws, then some gut shot straight draws, but then also hands, I mean there are not very many draws that I can have here, but then also hands like King 4 suited, where I have an overcard to the jack and where I have again the backdoor flush possibility. So that's the thing, you have to always look at the stack sizes as well to see if a bluff is not only immediately successful, but if you have enough power to bluff on the turn again, and if you have enough good implied odds with enough stack size. Okay, so these were my situations. I just give a short summary now about the strategy that we just covered. So pre-flop we have seen, first of all, I mean that's very obvious to every player that you have to adjust your opening range to your position. The closer to the button, the more loose you can play, the more hands you can open the pot. Then also, what most players do anyway is that you should only raise or fold when the pot is unopened to put pressure on the blind. And then one very important concept is that you should think how well the hand plays post-flop. So we saw that ace-8, which is technically the better hand with regards to showdown, the ace-8 plays not well post-flop, whereas 5-6 suited plays much, much better. So this is the kind of hand that you should put into your range, into your bluffing range. And also you should think of your next range. So you should, if you raise with a certain hand, you should think what happens if I get re-raised. Am I now exploitable because I have to throw most of my hands away because they're just not good enough, they don't have potential? Or have I chosen hands where I can show resistance with? I mean, this is very important to not be exploitable. And then we have also seen for making 3 bets in this example, we have to choose, I mean, to choose the bluff hands. We have to choose hands with a lot of potential after a call. Connectors, they are very suitable for that, especially high suited connectors. We should choose also hands which have a positive card removal effect, where we hold, which change the response of the opponent to our advantage. So in this case, we had ace-5 suited, and we saw that the ace out of the deck changes significantly the response of the opponent. Then we covered post-flop some strategies. So one important thing is to not overplay medium hands. If you're out of position, it's not good to play big pots with medium hands. It just costs a lot of money in the long run. It's much better to have control and keep the pot as small as possible. And then for choosing bluffs, it's like in pre-flop actually. In pre-flop you have to choose hands with potential. The same thing is true on the flop or later. You should have semi-bluffs, which means nothing else than choosing hands with a lot of potential. And not choose hands where the only way to win the hand is by a successful bluff, but if it's unsuccessful, then I'm in deep trouble. So semi-bluff is the way to go. And for constructing a bluff range, we always have to see first, before we can think of the bluff range, we have to think of our value range. How big is the size of that? Can we hold many combinations now that would be a good value hand, or very few? And according to that, we have to build our bluff range. And in the last example, we have seen that it's very important to look at the stack sizes, to see if on the one hand I have enough power on the turn on the river to continue with my bluff, if I have really bluff power, or if I can make one bluff and then it's over. And also what is important is the implied odds. So it's much preferable to bluff with, to semi-bluff with hands or with stack sizes where I have enough implied odds to follow up also on the turn and river. Okay, so it was the part for the scenarios, so for the positions. I think you have seen now what you can do with Snowie, that you can analyze really in different ways with all those features. What is the right play and why is this the right play? You can change the position according to your needs. You can change and see what changes, what kind of effect they have. And I think what you have also seen is how Snowie plays, that it makes quite a lot of sense how it selects the hands and how it actually plays, and that it covers, I mean, that it looks at all the details of the situation. I mean, Snowie sees the stack sizes and has played trillions of hands and just has, by experience, it knows these things. What I would like to show you now is how to use the PokerCoach for the other purpose. That means importing sessions that you have made yourself. I can show you how it works first. So you can click on import and it opens a window. Say I take these 3 hand history files. So now these hand history files are sent to our server, are analyzed and sent back. Actually the private information of these hands is even encrypted. So you choose your own password before the hands are sent, and all the private information like screen names, the poke name, the hand ID and stuff like this, which is not needed for the analysis, but which is also your privacy, is encrypted and is not sent to our server. Or it is sent, but in a encrypted way. And only after sending it back, now it will be decrypted and I can open the session. What I do now is I take a different session which I have imported before. It's 7,000, almost 8,000 hands. And I click on View Analysis and I see, first of all, an overview. So what I see first on the main page is, I mean, the most important thing is probably the error rate. So Snowie gives you a score, a grade of how well you played. So the lower the score, I mean, a 0 would be, an error rate of 0 would be perfect. This would be actually, if Snowie plays himself, he would always have an error rate of 0. This player, so is actually one of the Montenegro guys. He has played a lot with Snowie and has learned a lot from it. So he has his error rate quite well down. It's 5.20, which is, according to this scale, is a world-class level. You can see his profit, and we can see his blunders on the main page. We can also see that he, I mean, he actually won $1,200 here, but he gave up almost $800 in EV with just his blunders. So even there, for these players, there's quite a lot of room for improvement. And what they typically do, or what is a very good idea to do to learn from your own mistakes, and which is very efficient, an efficient way, is to browse through your blunders. If I click here, it will point out all the 32 blunders that I've made in a session. So I can go from blunder to blunder. Each time it's a quite significant mistake. And you can analyze the situation, you can review it, and you can see why Snowie, I mean, you can analyze why Snowie would propose a different move, and you can see if it makes sense or not. So that's one part of learning, which is very efficient because it's your own mistakes. It's not a hand that you haven't played. I mean, you have, for every situation, you have thought about it, and you have made a move with a certain reason. But now if you get pointed to the situation again, to me at least, it happens many times that I change my opinion and I finally agree to Snowie. Not always. Sometimes I think Snowie is wrong, or sometimes I think I don't really know. I cannot judge from the advice that Snowie gives me and from the analysis that I do. I cannot judge if my play was better or worse than Snowie's. But most of the time, I actually change my opinion and I agree to Snowie. So that's very efficient. I mean, these are many hands, so I can go through the blunders quickly, and I have analyzed my biggest mistakes in perhaps 1 hour. in a session where I have played, I don't know, 20 hours or so. So I go back to the main screen or to the statistics, and I just show you what else you can see there. I mean, there's the profit and loss, nothing special. There's the error details. I mean, here I can see all my blunders. A blunder is a big error, a significant error, and the errors, my small errors. So I can see also where I made the mistakes, in which round, pre-flop, flop, turn, river, and I can see the portion each round of the error rate. So this guy, Zelko, he's a very good player, and especially pre-flop he has learned by heart most of the tables, and he's playing very, very well. So he has a very good pre-flop error rate. And then the rest of his error rate is basically distributed more or less equally over the other 3 rounds. I can also say I click on all the blunders on the river, for example, here, the 7 blunders. I know I just go from river blunder to river blunder if I just want to learn one betting round better. Another interesting thing is the playing stats. I mean, in many statistical programs like PokerTrainer and Holder Manager, you can see all kinds of statistics. The advantage that we have here is, for example, the VPIP. The player has this 24% now, but we can compare exactly what PokerCoach would have advised, so how PokerSnowie would have played, with the exact same hole cards. So it's not a static number. It depends really on your hole cards, and we would, in this example, we could see that Snowie would have played even a little bit more hands than the player did, and the pre-flop raise the same. You can see the aggression factor for each round, comparing always the player to the coach. So this is very interesting, because normally in the statistical programs you see your numbers, but you don't know if they are good or bad, and you have to, it's just a number by itself. You have no idea how to change this number to make it better. You can compare to some players that are successful and see what kind of statistics they have. But here it's exactly with your hole cards and with the advice of Snowie, you can compare these numbers. For example, the full face and bet on the river, we can see here the player had 46% and Snowie 49%. So the player was a bit too loose, and he has called a bit too much on the river. At least he has not folded enough on the river. So this is a very interesting comparison that we can see on this page. And then the last page, which looks a bit complicated, but it's a very important page. I mean, one thing is to get the error rate down. This is probably the most important thing, that you don't play blunders, you just play well, and you don't make big mistakes. But then, if you do this, it still doesn't mean that you're not exploitable. You could, for example, never bluff raise, which doesn't cost you EV, according to Snowie directly, but it costs you EV if the opponent adapts and exploits you suddenly. So this page is about the balance. So the balance of, for example, races between your bluff races and the value races. So let's take an example. We take the races on the river. They are separated. First of all, you see in the lines there's a call row, a bet call, and a raise row. And there are columns for pre-flop, flop, turn, and river. So we can go to the top, to the bottom right, and we see the races on the river. They're separated into bluff races and value races. The optimal number, according to Snowie, is 100% here in all these fields. So 100% means if Snowie, for example, in your session would have bluff raised 11 times, you should have bluff raised 11 times as well. So if the number matches, you have 11 and Snowie has 11, then the number is 100%. So this example, the player raised made 8 bluff races on the river, which results to 140%. So he bluff raised a little bit too much. So you can click on the 8 now, for example, and the filters here on the top right panel here, they are set automatically to the right settings. So that I'm seeing now all the situations where the player has made a bluff raise on the river. Here, for example, Snowie says it's a 1% raise opportunity, but 99% fold. And the player raised here, and the opponent folded. But this is one of the situations where he bluff raised. So you can go now through all these situations and see. I mean, he did this a bit too much, so he could try to find situations where it was either wrong, like in this situation. Here it says he should bluff raise 0%, or to see where he could just reduce his bluff raises. On the other hand, you can also change the filters so that you don't see the played bluff raises, but you can see the missed bluff raises, which is also very interesting, because now you can go to all the situations where Snowie thinks it's a good situation to bluff raise and where the player missed this opportunity. So let's find something with a bigger percentage. Here, for example. So perhaps I can just replay quickly the hand. Melchior raises and gets called, and everybody else folds. Now, check bet call. Check bet call. No, check, sorry. And on the river, it's a check bet. Now Snowie thinks it's a very good opportunity to bluff raise, to pretend you have the ace, even if you don't have it. And Snowie would do so 66% of the time. I think in this specific example, it's good that he didn't raise because the opponent has actually the ace. But of course, the advice of Snowie is completely independent on the actual cards of the opponent, because at the time of the play, they're obviously not known. So you can set the filters here to very different things to see all kinds of missed plays or all kinds of plays that you actually did value or bluff raises, bets, or checks, all these things. So this is a very important table, which, I mean, now it's 8,000 hands, and the number of hands is probably a bit small, especially for the river races and stuff, so it's very meaningful here. But on the flop and turn, for example, it becomes meaningful. It's much better if you have more hands imported, and then you can really see if you have leaks that opponents can possibly exploit. Okay, I think that gave already quite an overview. So I think I pass to you back, Eric, if you're still there.
Okay, yeah, I am still here. Let me ask you a question. Do you have anything here where you can could show the PokerTrainer, or not in this presentation?
No, I cannot. The PokerTrainer is in alpha phase still, so it's not published yet, and it's also an iPad version only at this point of time. So I can unfortunately not show this here. But okay. I can quickly tell you what it is about. I mean, you have seen it, but it's an iPad application where you can play against Snowie, and actually you will be able to play also against other humans mixed with Snowies for rating points. So it's like you said in the beginning about FIPS and backgammon. So we have a similar formula, an ELO rating formula that was used for backgammon the whole time, but we adapted this for poker. And at this PokerTrainer, it is used for people to play for rating, so that the play is for something significant, because the rating was always taken very seriously for backgammon. So you have a good game going, a reasonable game without cash, and you can see really the skill levels of the players. You can see who plays better by this rating, and what you will be able to see, hopefully at least, is that the rating of PokerSnowie is quite high and better than all other players.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to fire off some questions, but the first that I've kind of just been copying down a little bit. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take back control of the screen sharing. I'm going to leave you, how do I do that? I guess you have to
yeah, I have to stop screen sharing probably. 1 second. Okay.
Right, so I'm going to share this. Like, just to give you an example, I mean, this was the results of a session I played against the PokerTrainer where boy, it was great. We won $340, but but it looked like we played at a really, really low level. So what we would
say it's 125 hands I see, so it's not really significant also for the error rate.
I appreciate you making me feel. I appreciate you making me feel better by saying that. So, but what this can do, it's kind of cool. You know, they're different. They're different. Like here, like all the hands that are in my database, and you can segment it out by your different sessions and stuff like that, which I think is.
You can also filter by date and by poker room and stuff like this.
Right. So I mean, so you could basically just browse by blunders, like you were saying, and then just go 1, 2, whatever it is. Okay, I find it very interesting. Now let me go through a couple of the questions that came up, and you guys can fire more out there. And I just basically copied and pasted some of these. A couple of the questions are very similar, and I'm going to take a shot at answering some of them, but I'd rather have you do it also, is questions that sound very similar. In other words, one that says something like, well, you know, what if the guy is a nit? Okay, why is he opening? But if the guy is a nit, I presume he wouldn't open there. Or if, how does it know what the other person has? See, there's the first question, but if all players still in the hands are nits, ace 8 off is a raise, etc., etc. And then other similar types of questions like Snowie is bad, like words like that, in determining correct ranges for short stack poker. And I think it's important for people that are not familiar with Snowie and GTO in general to realize is that that's the problem, not problem. That's in a way the beauty of it is the difference between what GTO looks to do and what exploitative play looks to do. Like the whole idea of GTO, and this is in my opinion, whatever, is that it factors in how a person should be responding to your range and how you should be responding to their range until such time no one can improve anymore. So to say something like, well, all that's great, but what if the guy's a nit? Okay, I mean, that means that if the player is not responding properly or aggressively enough, then yeah, in a way, if you wanted to be exploitative, you would change the way you play. But I guess the argument is that if the guy is that much of a nit, that he's giving away so much by being so tight that you could probably still get away with playing GTO. And while you certainly aren't going to be playing as well if you were playing perfectly exploitatively, you're still doing pretty well. But the thing I wanted to, I guess, ask is this third thing. Snowie is quote-unquote bad. Again, I want to address this. At determining correct ranges for short stack poker. And again, this goes back to what I did a lot of work on pre-flop all-ins and pre-flop reshoves and stuff like that, which is really my expertise, is short stack poker stuff. And again, when you're talking about developing a computer or a system or whatever it is to deal with, responses and short stack play and stuff like that, again, just the way it works is you have to, let's start with, all right, let's just say I shove all in and the guy's only calling 2% of the hands, for example. Then I could shove any 2 cards, right? But then the big blind gets to play too, right? He's not an idiot. So if he knows that I'm going to shove any 2 cards, then he can call a little looser. And now that I know he's calling a little looser, I have to tighten up, and so on until we get to that stage of equilibrium. So when you're running an algorithm that determines that, I guess I guess my point would be is that it's not possible for it to be bad, right? I mean, like a neural network or an algorithm that determines GTO play, especially in short stack, it can't possibly be bad. All it can be is, GTO, meaning that you can't beat it other than playing GTO. It's by no means saying it is the best play, right? I mean, if you knew what the guy had, or if you knew what kind of player the guy was, or if you knew what the guy's HUD stats were and things like that, but to say that something is bad because you don't know what their ranges are, is bad at constructing ranges, I think you should probably talk about the difference between GTO in general and, being kind of a HUD whore where you just play exploitatively every hand.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's a very big difference if I play exploitative or if I play GTO. And the beauty with GTO is that independently on how my opponents play, if they play super tight or super loose, my GTO approach will always win against these guys by definition. This is just math, and if I have the optimal strategy, the other guy cannot deviate and win from me something. So if he deviates and plays super tight, he can still not win because he gives up too much equity by playing so tight. It's exactly like you said before, so that he does not recover this if I call finally his bet or his raise with a weaker hand, because he plays very tight and most of the time he has the better hand then. But he cannot recover the EV lost by playing so tight. And the same thing is true if he plays too loose. So in both directions, the GTO approach will always win. So now, on the other hand, it's also clear if I play on a table low limit and my opponents, they are just very weak players, I can do better than GTO. I can deviate myself from GTO in the direction to exploit the opponents, which makes myself also vulnerable. I can be exploited suddenly myself. But if my opponents are really weak, they will not even notice, and I can just win more from them. But, I mean, most players, they play the exploitative style, but not knowing the base for this. And the base is, I mean, you have to deviate from something to exploit the opponents, and this base is actually GTO. So GTO should be used when you are at an anonymous table, for example. You also have to play poker. You cannot use your HUD. You don't have statistics on your opponents. And the only strategy that you can have is GTO. So now if you collect statistics on your opponents, you can start deviating from your base. But most players, they just don't know this base. So it's much better to actually know the base and then deviate to win more if you're playing on a weak table. If you're playing on a high stakes table, you probably cannot deviate too much without being exploited yourself.
This is exactly what I've been telling people as far as pre-flop stuff goes. Is that, you know, I put up these GTO charts and these GTO things where people can shove or call or things like that, and they say, well, what if the guy's really tight? I'm like, okay, well, let's start with what GTO is. Let's just start with what's unexploitable. Let's start with what you could play against everybody, so that at least, as you were saying, at least you know what you're deviating from. And if you don't have any really good stats or any good reads on a player, then it's probably you're just going to be better off just at least going with that base in the first place. But here's the question I have. You know, you always mention that you spent trillions of hours learning and things like that. And I'm just, again, just I guess because I'm not a computer science guy and I'm not a computer guy, you know, I wonder what that really means. In other words, like, again, back to my thing about pre-flop stuff, you could figure that out kind of just by, you know, doing the math back and forth. You know, just using sit and go power tools, right? I mean, like, you could shove this, they can call this, then you tighten up, then you loosen up and things like that. What exactly does the playing of itself do for you?
Well, the thing is that you cannot really calculate all these things.
Right.
You may be able to do this for very short stacks, short stacks. But as soon as it becomes a bit more complex, I mean, we're talking about stacks of 400 big blinds now, or even regular stacks, 100 big blinds. It is impossible to calculate all those combinations and calculating the exact solution to this problem. I mean, the exact GTO solution, we will not, we will be for many years dead by this when this is found.
I figure.
I mean, this will be in 100 years or several hundred years. It's way too complex for that. So this is why we can only have an approximation to this problem, which is what we are doing. And I also want to reply to the original question that somebody said for shallow stacks, for short stacks, Snowie is bad, as he said. I don't think Snowie is bad in these situations, but it is true that actually for Snowie it is easier to learn deep stacks because the errors are bigger there. I mean, if Snowie doesn't play perfect short stacked, it means it makes mistakes, but these mistakes are probably not so big, because how much can you lose, how much EV can you give up if you only have 5 blinds available? I mean, it's not that much that you can give up. If you have 100 big blinds and the last river bet is 50 big blinds and you make a mistake, that's a very big mistake. And the neural net, how it works, is that first it learns all the big mistakes, and once somehow done, it starts learning the smaller mistakes. So it is even possible that in short stack situations, Snowie is not really optimal and has a small weakness there.
That's
I think the guy who said it's bad, he's kind of right. I think it's not really bad, but it's perfect in this situation for sure. That's clear. But on the other hand, as I said, the AI is still training at this time, and compared to the AI that was released, it's I think 3 months or so ago. So it has done some significant improvements since then, because also the learning algorithm has been improved. So at some later point of time, there will be an update of the AI, and yeah, will be even improved.
I have one question again about just now, I guess, the strength of the machine, and then I want to get into some kind of technical questions that people asked about how to use it.
Yep.
I was thinking the one sport or the one game I didn't bring up in the terms of this computer thing was chess, and
yeah.
I don't want to turn this about whether the PokerSnowie can beat the players or how you could beat the computer too much, but I remember back when Deep Blue and all the chess computers came out, for a while what would happen is, you know, the strongest players would figure out ways to beat the computer, meaning that you realize that the computer would be tactically perfect. In other words, you know, the computer could just throw out its pieces, wait to find the cheapo, whether it was 3 moves or 20 moves away, and just basically not have to play positionally at all. But eventually, you know, what happened was the players figured out how to just basically play positionally and do things that the computer couldn't understand, really. But eventually what happened was a combination of, I guess, the computer became so strong tactically that it could see that many more moves, that trying to kind of trick the computer or to play just uber positionally and not get involved in anything complex, that wasn't good enough either. And God forbid the computer could actually learn how to play positionally and not have to rely on its tactical skills. Then at that point, the computer became, like you said, just better than the top player. And so I wonder again if anybody attempted to try to figure out a way to beat PokerSnowie again for your own reasons. I mean, it would just be a challenge for anything else. I mean, it seems very similar that eventually the neural net will become so strong that you wouldn't even be able to do that.
Yeah, I was actually a heavy chess player myself when I was young, and I also followed the Deep Blue contest with Kasparov. And yeah, I think you're right in that in the beginning, players could have a positional strategy and even beat the strongest computers at this time. And the same thing was true in backgammon. In Backgammon Snowie 1, the first AI that we released, it also had a weakness. It was about back games. So people could trick Snowie into these situations by playing very weird in the beginning, getting all the checkers hit and playing a back game, and tricking Snowie into this kind of positions where Snowie was actually weak. And in that sense, with this trick, they could beat Snowie in the beginning until we made an update of the AI where this was fixed. So now, for poker, it's a bit different because there the game is just too short to trick Snowie into something, because the game, I mean, the whole cards, the community cards, you cannot change. I mean, it's only a few moves and the game is over, so which is way too short. I think at this time, people could still beat Snowie if they have the inside knowledge. I mean, if they just play against Snowie without analyzing beforehand how Snowie plays, I think they would have a very, very hard time beating Snowie. But if they look at the hand ranges, and they could find specific situations where Snowie's hand range is out of balance, and they could actually beat Snowie, which is a quite unfair contest, in fact, because they could look into Snowie's brain, but Snowie could not look into the other player's brain. And
well, the only thing I would counter that is poker. And again, I don't want to turn this into a computer versus human thing. Don't forget that the real advantage the computer has over the player is that the computer is always going to do what it feels is right. You know what I mean? And it's never going to tilt, and it's never going to speculate just because it feels like it. And that's a really, really big, that's a really huge deal.
That's for sure. But what our plan is also to create exactly this kind of challenge, like we had like there was in chess with Deep Blue. What we want to do is a challenge with one or several of the very best poker players in the world, and take an AI, which is then the latest version, which they haven't seen, so that makes it a bit fairer, so they cannot beforehand analyze the brain of Snowie, but they just have to play it and see if they can beat Snowie and play better than Snowie or not. So this will be a challenge, hopefully very soon, and I'm looking very much forward to that. I mean, and I'm excited to see how Snowie performs actually.
All right, I have one question of my own. Then I'm going to go through some more. My one question is why and how and will PokerSnowie, why is it not, and when, if any time, will PokerSnowie be able to import and analyze MTT hands?
Well, as I said before, the MTT hands in the beginning, they should be treated like cash hands. So technically, we could open the opportunity to get these hands analyzed. But then later on in the tournament, there needs to be tournament strategy. And this tournament strategy we just have not implemented. It's again a quite complex thing to implement. And it's probably an own research project to just implement this. We just haven't done it yet. It will be done at some point of time, but not in the very near future. So what we could perhaps offer is to import these hands just regardless of the price distribution, so that the players can see if it was cash game, I should have played this and that, but then the adjustments for the tournament strategy, they still would have to do themselves.
What is the, I'll it's really in caps, so I'm going to go in there. What is the error rate of the top human?
Well, that's a good question. We have tested with several top players to let them play against Snowie so that they don't play exploitative and they don't make errors on purpose. So they have an error rate of around, I would say, 4 to 6. So this guy that I showed here, I mean, I think his average error rate is a bit higher than 520, which was here the case. But he plays very close to Snowie, and players like Jungleman or Ike Hexton and guys like this, they have a pretty good error rate. They rate, yeah, between 4 to 6, I could say. It depends a bit. It's a difference if it's heads up or ring game. In ring game, the error rate tends to be a bit higher, but it's that range.
Mike K from out there, you speak English? Do you have a mic? Is it plugged in? Yeah, you seem to be very familiar with all this, and I've been seeing some of the questions that have been coming on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up your mic, and you could go ahead and ask him. And this way, you know, again, I'll hopefully be able to get him to answer some of the questions that I wouldn't think to ask. So let me do that. Promote to presenter, or no? Let's just unmute him. Oh, I got to promote him to presenter. All right, I'll do that. Promote to presenter. Okay. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, excellent. Okay, so Mike, go ahead, and you seem to be very intelligent about all of this, so you probably will come up with better questions based on what everybody else has been asking than I would. So go ahead and fire away.
Cool. Thanks for that. I've got everybody fooled if you think I'm that smart. But my questions, I just got Snowie a week ago, and when looking at the EV for different things, because as I understand it, Snowie basically has 3 bet sizes: half pot, full pot, and 2x.
Right.
And I'm wondering how it figures the EV when I make a 3/4 size pot bet. Snowie will show me the EV of different bet sizes, including a bet size that, as I understand it, it hasn't trained on. So how does it know?
Well, it actually has trained on these bet sizes. Snowie is restricted to use only 3 bet sizes for the reason that for each bet size, it constructs its own range, its own racing range. And if you have like 10 different racing ranges, it becomes even more complex than it is already. So it only has these 3 racing ranges. But during training, the computer opponents against Snowie, they have a bit more liberty, and they bet actually also like 62% of the pot, and they bet all kinds of amounts. And Snowie has trained these situations, although it's not actively using different bet sizes. The plan here is for the future also to add more bet sizes, especially what you said, 3/4 of a pot is a very popular bet size. So this will be added to the system. I don't think it would change a lot in Snowie's performance, because I don't think it's super critical if I bet 60% of the pot or 70% of the pot. What is much more critical is to select the hands for the for the raising or betting range correctly. And also, I mean, for example, the 2 times pot range is 2 times pot is a bet size where most of the times the opponents will be folding because of the high bet size. So in that sense, the range has to be constructed very differently, so much more polarized than condensed for like a half pot bet size, where probably there will be opponents still in the pot after my bet or raise.
I actually agree with what you said about 3/4 probably not making a huge difference because it's not dramatically different than a pot size bet. But I'd be really curious at some point to see what Snowie thinks of smaller bets. Like the typical 4-bet pot. People are c-betting third pot. Those sorts of spots. Or versus different stack sizes. Sometimes it's interesting to maybe have a smaller bet sizing.
Yeah, that's also the plan. I mean, we will add 3/4 of the pot and some other bet sizes, something small, something bigger, and that's about to come in some time. It will take some time, actually, but that's on the to-do list.
Yeah, Johannes, we had wait one second. Yeah, Johannes, we had a guy. We had Helmut. I think Mercier is his name, who developed the the Hold'em resources algorithm and all that stuff. And it took them forever to figure out how to get 3 and 4 betting into their algorithm. So I guess there's a question out here. Does PS plan on testing 4 bet sizes that are in pot? I guess you just answered that. It's just kind of hard. I mean, you're going to test a whole bunch of sizes, and it's just kind of hard to do. I'm sorry, Mike, I interrupted you. Go right ahead.
Well, the other question is, when looking at some hands that I imported in some different spots, sometimes Snowie chooses a line that it basically is saying is a lower EV. So it'll say the EV for a half, an EV for my 3/4 and an EV for a pot, and it might choose, its optimal betting line in a spot where it's actually a lower EV than some of the other bet sizing. I was wondering what's going on there.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good question, and that's a problem that many players have, and a problem of understanding. Let me explain you how it works with the bet sizing. So let's say you open the pot, very simple situation. So now you can say, okay, with aces I bet always 2 times pot, and with ace-5 suited I always bet 1 pot, and with queen 10 offsuit I bet half. You can choose the bet size that you want. But then in the end, what happens is that the opponents will find out that each time you bet, you have a strong hand, for example. So what is much better, and what most people also do pre-flop, is to just choose one bet size. And then after you have chosen this bet size, you have no more the freedom to choose different bet sizes for certain hands. So what Snowie also does is, first of all, it looks at the whole situation, but disregarding his own hole cards. So it looks at the situation and says, okay, now I have a certain range that I can hold, and what is the optimal bet size for my range of hands? And then it chooses, for example, half pot. But that does not mean that for each individual hand, half pot is the best betting size. It just means if I don't want to be exploitable, and I don't want to give tells by my bet size, I have to choose one bet size which fits for all hands, and which is the optimal bet size for all of my range. So this is why sometimes you can see that for an individual hand, the EV of a different bet size may be even higher than for the best bet size, but for the whole range of my hands, Snowie is choosing the optimal size.
All right, yeah, it makes sense. So the information hiding of having a standard pre-flop raise size is kind of...
Yes, I mean this counts for all rounds. From
I was thinking more in terms of post-flop, but it's the same argument, I guess. It starts with range balancing issues before it gets into always choosing the maximum EV bet size.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it'd be too complex anyway to implement. So I don't want to monopolize this, opportunity to ask you questions, because I literally could ask you questions for the next 3 hours. But the other one that's top of my mind anyway is this group of guys that you've trained. If you could tell us a little bit about how you think we could get the best benefit out of using Snowie. In other words, just I know you mentioned earlier, just always check your blunders. but sort of effective ways that the professional level player could kind of get the most bang out of the buck in using this tool.
Yeah, I think the good starting point is to go through the blunders. I don't think it's sufficient. I think you should also see situations, even with small errors, to see if the balance that you have in this situation is somehow right. Like we saw with the jungleman position with the Jack 4 suited, that you really notice these things and that you find out by analyzing situations and see, I don't have a lot of value hands, so I should have a lot of bluff hands as well. So I think you should just analyze as many things as possible and get your error rate down at the same time, and then look at the balance statistics to see that you are not exploitable in some way. I think if you have done these steps, then you are in a pretty good shape. So what we will do also in the future is to refine the balance page to go deeper into details. So to see not only the races, bluff races on pre-flop, but to go deeper into 3-bets, 4-bets, bluff races and stuff like this. But I think how it is now, it's already a very good starting point.
All right, Mike, I'm going to poof you for a moment, and I'm going to take these Vinny calls for a second. Thanks, Mike. Demote you. So Vinny has his three questions here who he's been patient for. One, timeline for PokerTrainer. Second, whether that's going to be free. I doubt that. And you know what? Let's take and then what is the most training that it's done, whether it's been on 6 max, heads up, or full ring?
Okay, PokerTrainer timeline. Yeah, I better say nothing because
Good enough.
I know it will be later than what I say. So I will skip this question if I may. Pricing, it's also, I will skip this question. I think what the plan is that if you have PokerCoach, which is our main product, then you have automatically free access to the PokerTrainer. Otherwise, the plan is not yet clear if in the beginning it will be free or if there's a small charge for this. Unclear. So what is trained most? 6 max or heads up or something. I think it's pretty evenly distributed. So
okay.
yeah, I think it's pretty even, in fact.
Okay, now here's a question which again I'm going to answer because it doesn't seem. Someone says how much. Well, okay, very interesting. Two people asked similar questions. One said, what could we expect to win playing a Snowie style? Obviously, it depends on who you're playing against and what strength player you're playing against, and how much that player deviates from GTO and how just bad that player is in general. But I think a better question is what are the top guys at 500 no limit, again without giving too much privacy stuff away. Like what kind of big blind per 100 are the top guys who have spent the time? Because I think that's relevant. I mean, if you are willing to spend the time learning and are willing to spend the time grinding the software and learning the best way to use it, what kind of win rate, again, it depends who you're playing, but what, give it, show off a little bit, tell everybody what they're, give them an idea of what people are making.
Well, they are actually winners. I mean, they pay their rake, they get also a rake back, of course, but even
Sure.
without rake backs, they have a positive P&L, I can say. And I know of some guys that use Snowie also professionally, but they play really high stakes. They play the 50, 100 games and 100, 200 games. And these guys report me that they have improved quite a bit with Snowie, actually, and that they win more than before. At these stakes, I think that's a very good sign.
All right. Somebody asked if there's going to be a discount for PXF members. Yeah, absolutely. I don't exactly know what it is, but whatever it is, that's certainly for sure.
Yeah, what I can tell to the people now, which Stefan told me to tell everybody, is that you have 5 more days with a 20% discount, and on the 23rd or 4th or whenever it is, this offer is not valid anymore. So I think it's 5 more days from now on. There is a 20% discount on the PokerCoach. So the price is normally 149 euros, and it's 119 for the time being.
Okay. All right. Now, again, a lot of this stuff is kind of technicals. You know, obviously everybody wants you guys to be able to import hands from every poker room, right? Everybody wants you to be able to, you know, they want to be able to review the hands of the stuff that they played. I'm just presuming that that's just an ongoing process for you developing.
It is. I think yes, of course. I mean, the main implemented already. So sometimes it's a problem that you have to set your language to English to have the proper hand histories, because we don't yet support every single language of hand history files. And but for the main sites, it is all supported. There are sometimes, I mean, there are things like multi-table tournaments which are not supported, and the anti-hands at this time, they cannot be imported. But the regular hands that everybody plays, I mean, most of the people should be happy with what we support at this time.
Well, great. You know, one thing that Stefan and I kind of talked about is maybe doing something for the future where we make this a regular thing, where you or somebody comes on and we look at someone's hands and stuff like that, and, you know, take on some more questions and things of that nature. I happen to have enjoyed this quite a bit because, number one, I like talking to smart people, and I like talking to people that know more than I do about a lot of different things. And I also am happy to, you know, to meet the new guys that are in the chat here, obviously pretty well versed in this type of thing also. So and again, we could, as Mike was saying, if we wanted to, we could be here for 30 hours answering all the questions.
Yes, I guess.
But
Yeah.
we're not going to do that because Mrs. Sheets is waiting for me, and I'm sure Mrs. Ms. Levermann or whoever is waiting for you too. So I am going to poof all you guys, and thanks everybody coming. This is going to be recorded. This has been recorded. And I guess that's all I got. Thanks, Mark, for setting this up. Thanks, Johannes, Stefan, and everybody. And, yeah, I'm going to end the meeting right now. Take it easy.
Okay, thank you, Eric.